So welcome to Nextflow Summit in Boston. This is our first time doing this event in North America. Very excited to do so. A little history on the event. And thanks to you folks for tuning up and for making it the event that it's going to be. We've already had some period, obviously, with the hackathon so far, but for the next day and a half or so, we're going to hopefully a ton of exciting talks all around Nextflow and the Nextflow ecosystem. A little bit of history on the event. This started off in really around 2017, where we did our first hackathon, which is called NF Hack. The project was much smaller at the time. The project, in terms of Nextflow, kicked off in 2013 at the Center of Genomic Regulation. We were looking at multiple sequence alignment. As it's kind of continued to grow, we were sitting there looking at the traffic of Nextflow and thinking, what's happening here? All of a sudden, the top of this graph in Google Analytics was this place called Massachusetts. And it was kind of this weird thing, completely accidental. So it's really nice to be here finally to run an event, given the kind of interest which has happened from that as well. So a little bit of kicking off a little history here. So when I mentioned that first hackathon event, that happened around 2017. You can see that at the time, Nextflow had some interest, but it was relatively low. And since then, it's just really been organic growth, which has been driving the project forward. And I talk a lot. We were originally, obviously, based in Barcelona, where we started the project. The company Seqera was founded there. But really, since then, if we look at where the user base is, where the customers are, it's really driven from a significant interest in the US, and in particular, in the Boston area, and also in California, where the kind of biotechs are focused as well. So jumping on to this, when we kind of look at that, and we look at that user base, there's nothing really specific in Nextflow that says this should be used for biopharma, or this should be used for life sciences. But I guess one of the key things is kind of looking at what the applications people are developing on top of Nextflow. And when we look at that kind of breakdown, I've kind of gone through a little bit of the audience of the people who are here today and looking at the kind of really amazing science that folks are doing here. Whether this is across biopharma and medicine in terms of this target identification with CRISPR screens, we're looking at streamlining drug approval with RNA-seq. Really, the list continues, a broad range of applications, and really people are coming to Nextflow to solve many of those problems that they have. Biopharma is obviously the largest use case of this, but we also see it in agriculture and animal health, in synthetic biology, really any areas where there's large amounts of sequencing, and that sequencing is typically tied to some outcome, which maybe is a clinical trial, or maybe this is related to the development of some new materials. Really driving a lot of the adoption of Nextflow. And we also see it outside of the life sciences space as well. We've spent some time looking at some pipelines recently in terms of sort of radio astronomy as well as like satellite image analysis. So there's some really interesting applications of Nextflow which are happening. So I really encourage you over the next day and a half or so to mix and to mingle, to learn about the science that colleagues and the like are doing, and to kind of learn from that and to continue to collaborate. Onto a few logistics. So there's Wi-Fi, which is in the building. You should be able to connect to this via the Hilton Honors meeting, and there is the password for that, which is Patriots. If you see any of the folks with the white Nextflow Summit t-shirts on, you can ask them as well for anything like this. We've got Phil at the very back there. You can wave to Phil. And related to that, there's going to be a Slack channel which is open, which is called Summit 2023 in Boston. And this channel is where all of the speaker notes are going to be taking place. So if you've got questions for speakers, you can post them then. If you want to interact with other folks who are around, want to find people to connect with, you can use those channels and those ways to do that. Onto the talks themselves. So as I mentioned before, you can write those questions into that channel. Really great if folks can upvote their questions as well. So as speakers are speaking, then the moderators can use that information to ask those questions, as well as kind of follow up with folks afterwards. So if there's any questions that you would like to see answered, which are not answered, you can follow up with those. And again, would ask the speakers to do the same on that. With regards to streaming, we have this live streamed on YouTube. And they'll also be recorded and edited and posted afterwards, so folks can follow up. If you want to share particularly interesting talks with your colleagues, feel free to do so on that. Now for a little change of tact, you may remember this logo from a little while ago now. It feels like a long time ago, but it was literally like a month. The last month or so, we've been doing a little bit of a rebranding project. As part of that, we've been transitioning from the original Nextflow logo to our new rendition of this, which is, you can see here. Obviously, there's a lot of similarities of that. And part of the reason for this was to really create some cohesiveness around the brand that we've been building with Nextflow and with Seqera as well. How it started, we began as an academic project, usually a project that we put onto GitHub. Since then, we started to get some users. We created a company, then we created a commercial product. It was a little bit like a backwards way to do things, and now we've been taking the time to really reassess that, to consider exactly what's important to us and how we can link all of that, those things together in a cohesive way. It took a bit of soul searching, to be honest, to kind of thinking about what was the essence of Nextflow and what was that. For us, it was kind of thinking about how we can apply modern software engineering practices, how we can make it easy for people to collaborate in science via use of cloud, containers, source code management with Git. Bring all of that together for workflows, and that's essentially what Nextflow is. When we think about that more broadly, though, what about outside of Nextflow? And really kind of thought about that purpose there, which is for us to make scientific data analysis accessible at any scale. And this is kind of a key thing which drives us now across not just workflows, but those other areas as well. If we look about the mission, it's to empower scientists with modern software engineering. So really to give folks that modern software engineering toolkit to be able to build on top of. And then kind of finally onto that is, what are we developing here? Well, it's not just like a single platform here or a single tool in some case. It's really a stack. And the idea is here we're kind of using biotech in a broad sense, but how can we really give folks all of the software and make that software accessible, make the data accessible, make the infrastructure collaborative in a way to build out that in that area. So this is our new branding, which we kicked off about a month ago or so. And you can see here it's really split now across not just Nextflow, but into multi-QC. It's a very widely used reporting tool. Fusion, which is our cloud-native file system, as well as Wave for container provisioning. And all of these tools really come together to play in this ecosystem, which is also joined and combined with many other pieces of software and tools and resources to make them available. As part of that rebranding, there's also a new brand name for what we previously called Nextflow Tower. And this has simply been rebranded to Seqera to make things simple. When we want to be specific about that, we often talk about the Seqera platform, but it's really the concept of bringing all of that together into the piece. And I'll be speaking a fair bit more on that in my talk tomorrow, really looking at a little bit of the usage of that and the technology there. So back to our agenda for the next day and a half or so. You can see we've already had a fantastic hackathon session, and today we're going to be kicking off with a couple of sessions which will be finishing. We're going to have a reception afterwards, which will be here, followed by the talks which will be taking place tomorrow. I'd point out there's also a sunrise run and walk, which will be taking place tomorrow at 7 a.m. for people who are keen. I would suggest wrapping up warm, particularly if you're not from the area as well. And with that, I'd just like to thank all of our wonderful sponsors. It's really great to get so many people and sort of building as part of this ecosystem. And I will pass it over to our first speaker. Let's have a lot of fun.